We are
All right.
live. So, welcome everybody to Wapiti Wednesday. I am Michael Batiste of Elk Calling Academy, and this is Wapiti Wednesday live Q&A with a wrinkle. So tonight I am joined by the man with the golden flowing locks of the mullet from northern Idaho, Mr. Jim Huntsman. Jim, how you doing, brother?
Man, I am doing way better than I should be. I appreciate you having me on, man. This is going to be fun.
Oh, it's an honor. I'm a little disappointed though that when the camera came on that you didn't have that mullet wig on.
Well, it's actually because I'm moving, man. I had to pack it up. I can't grow
Okay.
hair out that fast anymore.
You know, when I grabbed that picture to use that as the thumbnail for this video when I was setting and creating the event, I was like, I'm gonna set the mode here. I'm gonna goat him into putting that wig on.
Well, it worked, man.
Perfect. So, well, Jim, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what you're about, what you do, and all that good stuff.
Okay, I'm just getting all this technical stuff sorted out there, but yeah, like Michael said, I'm to the Western Huntsman Podcast. Um, I live up here in North Idaho, just kind of north out of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and I've got an interesting journey of hunting, and it started in Utah as a kid. I grew up in Utah hunting mule deer and elk and coyotes and everything else, and here I am, almost 40 years later, and yeah, just rolling along, man, trying to scratch out a living up here.
Nice, nice. Yeah, scratch out a
Yeah.
living, especially because you're like me, you're in the construction industry, so scratch out a living is definitely a good way to describe it right now.
Yeah, if you want, man, I can hook you up with some OSB pricing.
Perfect.
Get you some.
Perfect. Yeah, $50 a sheet.
Oh no, I mean, with delivery, we're looking at 60, $70 a sheet. That's at your discount though. Use promo code Elk Calling Academy for your discount on plywood.
There you go. So, Andy Dansero is saying, "I don't see you." Andy, are you seeing either of us? Man, I guess better jump over to YouTube and make sure that everything is working. Do you got it playing in your background?
Yeah, so I have the YouTube on, but I have the sound off.
Okay, but you can see us and everything.
Yep,
Oh, I can see
we're
us too.
there's quite the delay, but I can see it.
Yeah. No, I can see it also. So once again, it's technical difficulties on Andy Dancero's side. So, all right. So started your elk hunting journey in Utah as a kid. Now, when you were hunting in Utah, was that rifle hunting for elk, or was that deer hunting, rifle, bow, slingshot?
Yeah, so it's go ahead. Oh, you cut out really bad there, but
Yeah, you're kind of cutting out a little bit too. Must be your northern Idaho internet.
okay. I think I'm smelling what you're stepping in there, Michael. We had quite the delay going on, but it was mostly rifle hunting growing up. We did do a little bit of bow hunting. I didn't really get into bow hunting until I was kind of out of the service when I started taking that serious. But yeah, we were mostly rifle hunting. Got really good at mule deer hunting, man, and hunting that high country in Utah, and then not never did really get super great at elk hunting for a long time. And I think that one of not that I'm like putting any blame on anybody, but my dad and uncles and friends and they tried to hunt elk like the same way that you hunt mule deer, right? And it doesn't work. It doesn't work very well. And so we tagged out very rarely. And that was kind of how I as I got out of the service and moved more into getting more interested in elk hunting and moved back to Idaho and, really taking elk hunting a lot more serious. I had no clue what I was doing. All I knew was I was spending a lot of money and a lot of time for a little piece of paper without any holes in it at the end of the season.
Right.
But I do want to bring up, you said that you asked if I used a slingshot. And I got to tell you a little story. I have killed 2 scorpions, a rattlesnake, and a jackrabbit with a wrist rocket. And that was all in Utah before I was even in high school.
All right, Jim, we just had somebody say that your lighting is very dark. So I think that back window.
Oh, yeah. Maybe I'll pull that down, huh?
Yeah, pull that down real quick. So apparently these guys want to see your smiley face here. So, all right, Andy's in session. Michael Bozarth, how you doing? 503 Hunt Talk. Okay, we're getting a few people in now. Those of you guys that are tuning in, just remember this is just like normal Wapiti Wednesday live Q&A where you can put your questions in the chat. We've got it both open where Jim and I both can see them, and so. Maybe some I'll answer, others I'll put Jim in the hot seat. See, this is the fun thing here because normally I'm in the hot seat on his podcast, so this is kind of fun to return the favor and put him in the hot seat here.
That's right, man. I've had how many times you've been on my show? Like 3 or 4 times, haven't you?
Something like that, yeah.
I got a ton of comments. The last time I had you on, we were talking about goal setting for hunters. And I got a ton of great comments on that one. Tons of emails. It was a good episode, man.
That was a lot of fun because it was a little different topic than what we've kind of talked about. In fact, great segue there, Jim. Way to take us into our next segment here. So, Jim, when you're kind of getting ready for season, what are kind of some of the goals that you're looking for going into season?
Whoop, you cut out on me there, buddy. What did you say?
What are your goals when you're heading into season? What are you looking to accomplish?
Well, I do set a goal to actually notch a tag, and I actually take that pretty serious. And it doesn't always work out, but that is a goal. And my biggest goal when I'm if we're talking about like September archery season, right? That's kind of what I live for, and I have a suspicion you're pretty fond of September archery season too. But my goal is to go in and I want to call in multiple elk. I don't want just one option in a month. I want multiple options. And what I mean by that is not that I'm looking for some monster bull because I'm not a good enough hunter to be picky. I'm looking for the experience of calling in a lot of elk, and because I just get this thrill that carries me through the entire year, and that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking to call in a lot of elk, and at some point, one's gonna present me with a shot, and that's the one I'm taking. And I don't care if it's a spike, and I don't care if it's a 400, a 400 bull. It just doesn't matter. But for me, hunting is all about the experience and filling freezers and that just living in the mountains and enjoying everything that it has to offer, and have a lot of fun, and especially lately my kids are getting older. They're starting to go with me. My daughters are turning into really good hunters, and my goal is to make them better hunters than I was. So that's how I look at it, man.
No, that's a great approach. Now, would you say that with every encounter that you have in elk, there's generally something you can take away from that, some learning experience you can take away?
I don't know how you could be a hunter and go into the woods and not have some kind of key takeaway, some kind of learning thing that came out of it. I was just up a couple of days ago setting my bear bait because I'm bear baiting this year, and that's a new thing for me. I've never baited for bears. So I hauled a barrel up there, had this big 55-gallon drum, strapped to my pack, and I go put it where I wanted it. Found a great spot, and then I had to make the trip back to get all the bait, right? And I learned how to make that a lot more efficient next time. I think I have an idea to get it all up there in one trip because it's a ways.
Yeah.
And so, and I'm always looking for things like that. Like how do I become more efficient and cut down the time so I can spend more time hunting and less time preparing, and hopefully that answers your question. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, this past weekend, we went up camping and we were kind of riding around exploring some new territory that's just to the north of where we elk hunt. And half the group went on a hike and the other half went on riding on the side-by-sides. And the group that went on the hike went up this trail that I wanted to hit. And it's 2.6 miles long, but you gain 2,000 feet in elevation in about the last in about the last 1.4 mile. So it really gets steep. But what's funny is the group of us that were riding around, we kind of went to the north side, and all of a sudden we end up on this trailhead. And I'm like, where the heck does this go? It actually connects at the top of that other trail. Now, mind you, this cutoff trail is 3 miles long, but it has 400 feet in elevation change. So we just learned how to get to the top of the mountain a lot easier and a lot faster. And plus, that area that you're going through on that trail, I mean, there was benches and dark timber and creeks, and it was like, oh man, we're going to head back up next weekend, and we're going to go hike that area and take a bunch of trail cameras and throw them in all over there. So, all right, we got our first question. So Slinging Sticks says, have you guys seen what Oregon's drought level and forecast has been for this year? No, I haven't seen that, but he did go on to say, if you haven't seen the drought forecast or present drought level, it's almost extreme drought where he's at. What strategies would you stick with and what would you change? So what I would personally do in a drought year, your two most important things are feed and water. Because when you have a drought year, your feed is a lot more concentrated, and of course your water sources are a lot more concentrated. So you're going to have to do a lot of scouting and really find out where those feed and water sources are. And then you're also going to want to find their travel corridors in between those two, and that's where you're going to be living and you're going to be hunting. So, Jim, how about you? If you were hunting in an extreme drought up where you were in northern Idaho, how would you hit that?
Well, I think that you're exactly right. Now in North Idaho, we don't get a lot of drought kind of weather, but we did in Utah, and that was just kind of part of the game. Is it's all about water. I mean, you can always find it when you're like doing some e-scouting and looking kind of down on the plot maps and stuff, that where that vegetation and that greenery gets real thick and dark, there's going to be moisture around there. And that's kind of what I always focus on. Now, if you're looking in North Idaho, it's all like that, right? We just have more water than what we know what to do with. But for like Southern Idaho, and I think you said he was in Central Oregon?
It just says Oregon. Yeah,
you're going to get a lot of drought country out there. That's what I suggest. Yeah, just look for that moisture, because you got to remember, they can't live without water. So that's where they're going to be, without question, without denial. They are definitely going to be at those water sources. I mean, there's no way around that.
Oh, look at some of the drier states like Arizona and New Mexico, where they actually put those guzzlers, those tanks in. And the congregation of animals around those guzzlers is just incredible.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. That's how they hunt down there. They just sit on those things, and it's a great strategy. Yeah.
Yeah. See, I'm kind of the same way. I want to hunt near those, but I still want the calling aspect of it. And so that's where kind of getting them. Get them in transition or get them in those feed and water areas. So, Benito Boadilla. Hi, Jim. I used to live up in Rathdrum. Used to help my dad buck timber above Hayden Lake.
Oh, yeah. I know that area very well, man. I'm about 10 minutes out of Rathdrum right now. fact, I was just in Rathdrum today. They got a new, they got a new hardware store, and I like hardware stores, so I was there.
Perfect.
It's not that new. I say it's new, but been there a couple years.
Of course, with restrictions lifted this year, we might have to do a repeat of East Elk Calling Academy up in northern Idaho for the elk class up there.
Yeah, man, I'd love to. We should talk about that.
Okay. Andy Dan Searle, when are you going to start a podcast, Michael? I think I kind of just did with these live Q&As with getting the guest. Had Guy on the last one and Jim, so I think this will suffice for the podcast right now. So, all right. So,
tell Andy I'm moving down to Boise, and you and I are going to partner up and start our own butcher shop, and we're gonna move in on his corner.
So instead of Get Your Meat, we can name it Beat Your Meat or something like that. So
yeah, something. It's going to be really obnoxious and really successful, and Andy's going to be begging us for a job. That's all I know.
We can spin it off the name of his company. So, all right, let's get back on topic here. So when did you make the switch to archery hunting for elk? How long have you been chasing an elk with stick and string?
So I started bow hunting real seriously. That first, I got out of the military in the summer of 2003, and that fall was my first archery hunt, and it really didn't give me a lot of time to prepare. I just didn't really know what I was doing, but I had a lot of money saved up because I'd been overseas for a long time. So I had all this money saved up, so I bought a bow. And I started hunting mule deer with a bow, and man, that was a hoot because where we'd go, these bucks would be all over, coming in and out of the trees, like they were everywhere. And I wish I could tell you where it was, because it would not be somewhere where you'd expect, but there were bucks everywhere, and they would just appear, and you'd fling an arrow, and it was crazy. For 3 years, it was like that. And anyways, that's where I cut my teeth on bow hunting, and I kind of was taught, hey, if arrows aren't flying, they ain't dying, and that was the guys I was hunting with, and that's we laugh at that now. It's really not the right way to bow hunt, but it boils back to what I said earlier. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun doing that, but. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, that policy of arrows ain't flying, they ain't dying wounds a lot of animals, and I don't do that anymore. But that was kind of where I got, and it just kind of grew from there, man.
Yeah, and actually, you know what? I hunted one season with somebody like that, and that was his mentality. But he basically said, you can't get them if you don't fling them. So. Yeah, for somebody that's listening, this is going to be their first year of chasing elk with a bow, what piece of advice would you give them? Okay, so the one thing that I always like to clarify for me, and this is going to be different for a lot of hunters, but for me, I am not one of those archery hobbyists, right? Being an archer is not like a hobby outside of hunting. Being an archer and a bow hunter, it's all about the hunt, and that's simply a tool for me. And so when you're talking about archery, and some people might kind of they might kind of give me a hard time about this, but I feel like you have to be more proficient with your bow than you ever do with a rifle. And I'm really good with rifles, but with a bow, I feel like you have to know your gear better. You have to know what you're shooting better. You have to know distances and targets and all these things. And I'm not a super technical guy, but I do know how my bow shoots. And that goes back to what I was saying. I bought a bow in August of 2003 and went out that September after mule deer in the high country of Utah. And that just was not enough time. And so what I tell people is that is going to be like a side note, right? You're knowing your archery equipment and knowing how to shoot a bow. For me, unless you're like some kind of enthusiast where you just like to shoot your bow and like to be out there on the targets and all that kind of stuff, that's totally fine. But for somebody that looks at it like I do, that your bow is the tool that you choose to use for that particular season, you need to be super proficient with that. So you know what you have to do. You know what you have to do to become proficient with a bow. That aside, I think it is
more important to understand the species that you're pursuing. And since this is Elk Calling Academy, it's Wapiti Live, I would assume we're talking about elk. And elk are a lot of fun to learn about. And just understanding elk and their behaviors and how they communicate with each other and how they feed and how they breed and how they move from high country to low country and different types of terrains and habitats that they live in. What do elk need? Understanding all of that is in my opinion the most important thing that you can do, because you already know you have to learn how to shoot a bow. If this is your first season, you already know that you have to shoot a bow. There's great ways to do that. Go to like 3 or 4 different 3D archery shoots and you'll be in good shape. But it's the knowledge, it's the understanding that animal. And we're talking about just an amazing animal. This is an amazing species, and they're smart, they're fast, they're elusive, they're all these things that make them more fun to hunt than anything else I can think of. And so knowing them and understanding them, in my opinion, is the most important thing. What are you smiling at?
Some of the comments.
I feel like you're laughing at me, Michael.
No, I'm not. No, I'm
Are they giving me a hard time already?
No, I'm agreeing completely with what you're saying, but some of the comments coming in. Yeah, to kind of expand on the knowledge, it's, the average elk hunter harvests 1 elk every 5 to 7 years. And then we also hear that 90% of the hunters harvest, or 10% of the hunters harvest 90% of the game. Now, within that 10%, you have individuals that get it done every year. So what secret sauce do they have? And basically the secret sauce is knowledge. They understand what they're hunting. And it doesn't matter if they're an elk enthusiast or a mule deer enthusiast. They understand the animal that they're hunting. They understand their movements, their behaviors, everything like that. So yeah, I agree 100%. Knowledge is a key. I remember, back when I first started, once I really caught the bug, then I really, really wanted to know everything I could find about elk, why they did what they did and what their sounds mean and when they're doing this and when they're doing that. And that's when I really noticed an increase in opportunities and the number of animals that was calling in and the number of animals and the shot opportunities and all that just started to increase with the more knowledge that was able to gain. So I agree 100% with you there.
Oh, for sure, man. I mean, I am I should be the poster child for the world's dumbest elk hunter. And I'm not kidding you. I would go out and I would go to like the sporting goods store, and I'd buy all these random calls. I had no idea what they were. They were mouth, whether diaphragms or they were, external calls and these crazy, vacuum hose looking bugle tubes and all this stuff that I would go out and I'd buy. And I'd just go wander through the woods and make random sounds. And you know what? Every once in a while, I would get an elk to respond. And every once in a while, I felt like I was going to call one in. And I almost did a couple times. One time, you want to hear something crazy?
Sure.
One time, I drug a ground blind into the woods, like 3 miles. And I sat in this thing all day cow calling. And you know what I did? I called in a calf. This cow calf comes bouncing over these bushes, and she's walking all around my blind, wondering where is this cow call coming from? And she'd walk in front of me, and I'd blow a call at her, and she'd look. She didn't know where I was, and I thought I was this great elk caller when I did that. But no. Could I shoot a cow? Nope. Could I shoot a calf? No, I wouldn't shoot a calf. And and so that's kind of where I was just so lost. And that's about the time that I started realizing there's things like, podcasts and, resources like elk calling. And I started diving in and I went crazy with this stuff. I mean, my wife told me I was obsessed, and I was obsessed with it because I'd had these interactions with these elk, but I couldn't seal the deal. And this is where we're talking like 2014-ish now at this point.
Okay.
And I just couldn't figure out what I was doing wrong. Why couldn't I get an elk down? And I dove in like you would have thought I was in law school. I'd close the door to my room and I'd read and I'd watch videos and I'd listen to podcasts and all this stuff, and finally figured out how to call elk, man. And you were a part of that. And ever since I've done that, I have yet to go a season where I haven't called in bulls and stuck arrows in them. It's just that's what it takes. You need to be obsessed. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, no, definitely. So Sling and Sticks actually came back and says, I have a really hard time sitting still. We're right there with you, brother. So not hearing bugles, I get bored easily. He used to live up in Bonners, Idaho, and haven't experienced extreme drought levels. And on top of it, it's going to be a full moon for the best part of the season. So let me kind of expand where I was talking about find water and find feed sources. You're not necessarily going to sit on that water and feed source, but you're going to hunt around those. Now, the other thing you need to remember too is, since water is the key of life, they're not going to be bedded too far away from that water source. Now, to touch on your best part about the full moon, don't shy away from the full moon. Yes, the full moon is going to shorten morning activity and evening activity, but it's going to increase your midday activity. And that midday activity can be a great time to get into elk and harvest a bull. So if you're hunting around those water sources, and this is where Jim was talking about e-scouting, and you find those water sources, then expand your search and start finding that dark timber or dark pockets that they could bed down nearby that. You've got your hunt areas narrowed down right there. All right, Jim, this next question is for you.
Okay.
Oh, first off, 2 comments that are directed at you. Jim, that spot about being the world's worst elk hunter is already taken by Sling and Sticks, but you can have second place. In the great words of Ricky Bobby, if you're not first, you're last. And then Daryl says, well, Jim, with this mild winter up here in North Idaho, it's going to be an epic elk hunting year for sure. And actually, Daryl, you're right, because I don't know if you saw Fish and Game where they released the report of fawn and calf survival rate. Great survival rate. So, okay, question for you, Jim.
Yeah.
What caliber of bow is best for elk hunting? Asking for a friend.
Oh, come on. Who's messing with me? You guys know I don't answer those kind of questions. I don't know.
Andy.
The one that you shoot with.
That would be Andy. So, okay. So,
I don't even know what my bow is called.
And I think we kind of established that when we did that Time Behind the String podcast where the whole panel of us was on kind of talking. So, yeah,
for sure.
You're definitely on the opposite end of the spectrum of Garrett Weaver or somebody like that. So, okay.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Elk hunting, you get obsessed. You go into the room listening to podcasts. What was it that really helped you kind of gain that knowledge the best out of all? I mean, there's a plethora of avenues individuals could go with podcast and YouTube and Facebook and social media. Where would you steer somebody to really focus on first to kind of start going down that informational highway?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question, and I've thought about that. Here's how I answer that: is don't limit yourself to one platform. Don't just think that, okay, I'm just, because what happens is if you read a book, there's this book out there. It's really hard to get. It's called The Ecology of Elk, and if you read that book and it talks about the breeding season, right? And then you learn all these things about the breeding season and how elk behave and how cows respond to bulls and how they come into heat and estrus and all these things. And then all of a sudden the next day you watch a YouTube video and it's somebody that is kind of making a stalk on a small herd, and there's a herd bull in there and there's some satellites kind of running around, and you see what the cows are doing. All of a sudden that puts it together. It's like this puzzle. So what you read just came into view right in front of your eyes as to how that really makes a lot of sense, and it instills it better in your mind. And that's my opinion. So I never say just listen to a podcast or just watch YouTube videos or just read books. For me, when I say I'm obsessed, I was obsessed with this stuff, and I read, I watched everything, I listened to everything. A really good example, Michael, and you've been one of the guests on this, is we do that School of September podcast series.
Yep.
Where I bring somebody like you, somebody who's got years and years of successful elk hunting. You've got this thing where you know what that elk is saying. You know exactly what he's trying to communicate, or the cow, and you have a way to respond to get that bull fired up, or just bring that bull into you out of curiosity. You know how to do that. So I bring people like you on this series, and everybody has a little bit different take as to how that works and what's made them successful in the past, in the past. And if everybody just takes those kind of nuggets and applies it to their own personality and their own hunting style and their own thought process, and develop your own personal hunting style, that's how it's going to come together for you. Because I don't do it exactly how Michael Batiste does it in the woods, right? We have different traits about us that make us just different as individuals, and I don't care if we're talking about hunting or driving a pickup truck. That's just a fact of life. So, but what I do is I can put it into my mind. Well, that bull just made this sound, and I remember Michael talking about this in that kind of circumstance, so I'm going to try this. And it may or may not work. And if it doesn't work, I can say, okay, well, I also watched a video where they did this. Let's try that. And so the point is don't limit yourself to one type of platform or one medium, so to speak. Watch the videos, read the books, listen to the podcasts, follow people on social media, and they have these tips. That stuff will lead you astray, so be careful, be picky. That's my advice. That's my advice. It's just, soak it all up. It's like you go to the dollar store, right? And you buy this toolbox, and at the dollar store, they've got all these different tools that you could buy, and you're just throwing all these tools in this toolbox, and then you carry that toolbox into the elk woods. You're going to know which tool to pick out, and that's because you didn't limit yourself. You've got a whole toolbox. You don't just have a wrench and a pair of pliers. Does that make sense? You like that analogy, Michael?
Yeah,
pretty good. I just came up with that.
No, great analogy. No, and you're exactly right. Don't limit yourself, and especially, yeah, I'm Elk Calling Academy, but I encourage people, go listen to Corey with Elk 101. Go listen to Chris Rowe with Rowe Hunting Resources. Go listen to the Elk Bros guys. All you're going to do is expand your knowledge, and you're going to pick up a little bit from each one. And I love what you said about how we're all individual, we're all different. Don't just go out and emulate one person. Grab bits and pieces from every source that you're finding and mold it into your own style. So now you said that book was Ecology of Elk?
Whoop, you cut out there, Michael. I didn't hear what you just said there.
The book you talked about, Ecology of Elk?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Andy just said...
Yeah, so...
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Andy just said North American Hunting Club put a book out in the 90s called All About Elk. And great information, and I agree. I've read All About Elk, but I haven't read that Ecology of Elk, so I'm going to have to go hunt for that one.
So the Ecology of Elk, because I'm moving, I just packed it up. It's like a advanced college level type ecological book about elk and their habitat, and wildlife behavior, and all these things. And it's like not something that you sit down and read from cover to cover. It's something that you use as a guide to kind of, today I want to learn about how elk calve and the dynamics of a herd when it's calving season. Or tomorrow I want to read about what elk prefer to eat. Yeah, things like that. That's what that book is. And I'll be honest, it's a dry read, but it's worth it.
Sounds No, it sounds interesting. I'm definitely gonna have to find it. And you know, your analogy about the toolbox, even though Brian Davis says, "But a toolbox is heavy." Dot dot dot. Um, you're exactly right because as you really dive in and you start learning, you're going to look back on past encounters you've had with elk, and you're going to kind of chuckle and you're going to kind of laugh a little bit because there are times, and I talk to a lot of people at sports shows, and I always hear the same thing: is, man, we got into this hour and a half screaming match with this bull, and I'm like, okay, well, what were you doing? Well, we were cow calling, and we were 300 yards apart, and I was cow calling, and he would hit me with a bugle every time, and I said, let me guess, and he did a bugle like this, and they're like, yeah, that's exactly what he was doing. But then he would get kind of these other bugles where it was almost like he was getting frustrated, and I'm like, so basically that bull was asking you to come to him. And he was getting frustrated because you didn't realize he was giving you a roundup bugle that's saying, come to me. And you just stayed over there. And let me guess, finally, he just kind of got frustrated. He hit you with a great big scream that knocked your hat off, and then you never heard from him again. Yeah, how did you know? Because he kept asking you to come over. You didn't come. Finally, he's like, you know what? I'm done with you. I'm going to go elsewhere and find a cow that actually wants to listen to me and do what I'm asking. But then on the flip side, too, same scenario. You'll have people that are talking about these screaming fits, and they're bugling back at the bull, but this bull is giving them a bugle that's telling them to stay away. And that's exactly what they're doing. They're sitting there at 200 yards apart having a bugle fit with this bull, and this bull is continually telling them, stay away. Don't come near. If you come near, we're going to fight. Stay away. And if you don't know what the situation is, if you don't know that's what he's telling you, ultimately you're going to do exactly what he's telling you. You're going to stay away because you think that he's all excited, he's engaged, he's screaming at you, and he's going to come barreling in for a shot at any moment. But in reality, he's just sitting over there basically telling you to stay away. You're doing that, and he's basically going, good dog. Sit, stay, good dog.
Yeah, for sure.
Is Elk and Elk Ecology the one online for $250? Don't know.
Yeah, Elk and Elk Ecology said that because I was just wondering what the heck. I know I'm calling that book something wrong. I have it right here.
Sorry, I was waiting for this question to come up, buddy.
Sorry, buddy. What was that? I had a hard time hearing you tonight. I got it's cutting out really bad on me.
Yeah, you're cutting out over there. No, I was waiting for this question to pop up. So, Jim, what's your favorite White Claw for elk camp?
What's my favorite what?
White Claw.
Every time you go to say it, dude, it like totally, you cut out totally when you say exactly what you're trying to ask. I'm really sorry. My internet's terrible tonight.
A little bit.
Of course.
No. They want to know what your favorite White Claw for elk camp is.
Hey, can you hear me okay now?
Yep, I gotcha. You hearing me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. I really lost you there for a minute. You asked me a question. I don't even know what it was.
Basically, Mike Bozarth wants to know what your favorite White Claw for elk camp is.
Hey, Michael, I'm gonna cut out and come back in. Uh, Lost you.
Okay.
I don't know if you can hear me or not.
Yep, can hear you just fine.
I'll cut out and I'll come back in.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So
give me 2 minutes.
Yep. So while he is doing that, we'll hit a couple of your other questions. So Brian Davis. So I listened and went through all your videos and tutorials. Did Corey's Elk 101, both great content. First ever bull encounter, I blew it. head knowledge is great, but 2 bulls later, I had a blood trail. Nice. So, yeah, and Brian, that's kind of what we're talking about is just getting as many avenues and resources as you can to get that knowledge and build your style and build and you're gonna what you're gonna do is you're gonna get into situations out there and it's gonna be, oh, I remember that Corey talked about this or Michael talked about this or the Oak Bros guys talked about this. So it's good to have all of those. Chris, I see him as a fuzzy navel kind of guy. Oh, I love it. Oh,
Is Chris talking about me?
well, first off, you got people asking what your favorite White Claw for elk camp is. Chris is saying you're more of a fuzzy navel kind of guy. People are talking about drawing a stick figure on your side of the screen.
Hey, I can hear you a lot better now. I think my internet's gotten a lot better, dude.
Perfect.
Now listen, I do not drink White Claw, folks. That was Guy's fault from Western Contours, and now I'm going to have to get him back for this ridiculous joke of me drinking White Claws.
Well, just you wait until I put your address in the show notes and people start sending out packs of White Claws for elk camp.
Yeah, they'll make good targets, buddy.
Oh, come on now. After the end of a hard day of chasing elk, a nice ice cold White Claw wouldn't hit the spot.
I can't do it. No way. Can't do it.
All right. Okay. So when it comes to a day of elk hunting, would you say that you have a destination in mind that you want to get to, or are you more kind of cover ground until you find elk? What's kind of your approach out in the elk woods?
Well, that goes back to, preparing for season, right? And what I do is I'm more of a base camp kind of guy. I don't really go back into the backcountry anymore because I feel like I'm a lot more mobile with a base camp. And so what I'll do is I'll download like 30 different areas on and I use both Onyx, I use Base Map, I kind of use both of them. I'm not smart enough to figure out how to transfer waypoints, so I just use both of them and pay both their fees. But so I have like 30 different areas, and what I'll do is when I get back to camp that night, I'll kind of make a decision. What was that area look? How was that today in terms of did I hear anything? Did I see anything? If it was just kind of a ghost town up there, and I don't mean just in terms of elk bugling. I mean in terms of fresh sign and everything else that is there where I hunt an entire basin can be blown out by a pack of wolves, and I need to let that sit for a few days because those wolves will be there. Mm-hmm. And so I'll just go back to camp that night and I'll make a call. Okay, tomorrow I'm going to go to this spot. And then I come up with a plan, and I don't usually have just one destination. It's like this big loop I'm making. Okay. And I think that's how you do it. I just make this big loop, and I'll spend some time in this drainage and get up on top and drop down into the next drainage, and I'll just be calling, and I'll be covering country, but also sometimes I'll just sit and I'll listen. And sometimes there is a lot to be said about just sitting down, not calling, and just listening and just see what happens. I don't know if I can attribute to learning that from you, Michael, or what, but there's a lot of value in that. And so that's how my day-to-day goes. I move a lot, yes, but I also sit and listen a lot.
No, and that's great. And basically that's kind of that being aware of your surroundings, that kind of talk about quite a bit. And I think that's something that a lot of people kind of struggle with because they get so focused in their head that I've got to cover ground, I've got to hike a lot of country. And sometimes the reverse is opposite. When you actually slow down and take your time, a lot of times when you slow down, you see a lot more game than just blowing through areas.
Totally.
Andy. Oh, these guys are on you good tonight. So I'll
bet they are, man. I wish I could see the comments coming in, but I can't see them. I can't figure out how that works.
Oh, on the live on your phone.
Yeah, I can't. So what I did when I turned off, when I had to disconnect there,
Sure.
I put my laptop on my hotspot, so my phone's kind of hidden behind me in the window there, and it's getting better reception than the house internet. So
Okay. Perfect.
that's how we do it in North Idaho.
But hey, when you get to the new place, you'll have full bars and won't have to worry about any of this technical difficulty anymore.
Yeah, it's amazing what moving further out in the woods will do for your cell coverage. I'm here to tell you.
It's amazing what it'll do for your soul also, just getting farther out.
For sure.
So, okay, so kind of moving through. Let's kind of circle back to something that came up just a little bit ago about full moon. What's your thoughts on full moon and elk hunting during a full moon or a bright moon?
I have been a student of this whole full moon thing for a long time, and I know that there's a lot of opinions on it. For me, it really doesn't change anything. And I mean, you've got so many weeks in September, right? And I want to hunt all of them, as long as unless I tag out early, I'd be bummed if I tagged out like the first week, man, and I'd have to go find somebody to call for or something. But no, I want to hunt as much time as I can, and I don't stress out about a full moon. And the only thing that I've noticed that changes, and this could just be my area, or there's a lot of opinions on elk behave the same everywhere versus elk are different in North Idaho than South Idaho. I don't know. I don't know where the truth lies with that. All I know is, for me, when it's a full moon, I notice they're in their bedding area a little earlier, and so I don't head out before sunup during a full moon. I wait until 8 or 9 o'clock, and then I head out, and I get a ton of responses that way. I've had a lot of really good encounters on a full moon. In fact, old Broken Tines up here on the wall that I named the studio after. I don't know if you guys can see that or not, but he's over there. You see, that's why I call him Broken Tines, because he's all busted off because he decided to take a nosedive off a cliff. He was shot on a full moon, and he was all sorts of happy to talk about it, So I just don't pay a lot of attention to full moon. It's full. If it's full moon, that's the only difference. I don't get up at the butt crack of dawn and hit the mountain. I wait for the sun to kind of get up, and 8, 9 o'clock before I go.
So it kind of sounds like that you focus more on that midday activity then, when there's a full moon or a bright moon.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And that, that sunset time, that last hour and a half or so of daylight. Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But first thing in the morning, what I found is that when it's full moon, they feed. And again, this is just some simpleton dude right here you're talking to that is just, I don't know how much factors behind it, but I think that what they're doing is they're feeding, and they're done by the time the sun is about to come up, and they head up to their bed early, and they don't want to turn around and talk about it. They want nothing to do with anything other than getting to their bedding area, and so that's how I do it.
No, you're exactly right. So full moon or bright moon nights, the elk actually are a lot more active at night. So yes, they do head to their bedding areas earlier in the morning, and see, we're a little bit different because we actually get out of bed earlier on bright moons, because since it's so bright out there, we can actually start covering ground using the moonlight. Now, mind you, we know our hunting area really well, and so a lot of the areas that we hunt on, there's motorcycle trails, and so we'll be at that trailhead well before the sun comes up and start heading up that trailhead using that bright moon to light our way. We don't even need headlamps, so that way we're a lot closer to them, so that when it does get light, we're within striking distance, and we can actually utilize that short window a lot more. Now
that makes sense.
But the drawback to that is, since they're going to bed earlier, and we don't really, especially if it's middle of the season, we don't really bust bedding areas. We hunt the edges, we hunt the perimeters, And so that means when the elk go in and bed down, we've got this 4 hour window of where we just kind of stage and get ready for them to get up during that midday activity, and then we re-engage and we're back on them. And so that's kind of the time where, we'll deploy our hammocks out, we'll eat a little bit, we'll kind of get ready because we know that once they get up during midday, we're not going to be able to stop and eat a sandwich at noon. We're going to be working out.
Yeah, thanks to you, Michael, I about broke my back because I took your advice on getting a hammock.
Yeah.
And I set up and laid down in my hammock, and as soon as I laid down, the whole back behind my head comes off the tree and starts sliding down, and I landed on the ground. So I thought about getting some highfalutin lawyer involved and being I was going to sick him on you.
Yeah.
Because of Michael, I only had a slight bruise, so you're off the hook.
Well, and I kind of think you may have gotten the wrong hammock there. You didn't pay attention to the brand I was talking about.
No, I didn't. I bought some chintzy one, man, and it snapped.
Ah, see? You get what you pay for. So
you do.
Michael Butler said the same thing. His 2019 bull was killed on a full moon, and to him it makes no difference. You're exactly right that there's so many conflicting information out there about full moon, because you have diehard people that are like full moon is an absolute waste.
Yeah.
And then you have other people that are like full moon is my favorite time to hunt.
I think that it's like anything, man. You get people that they get real hung up on what type of bow to use versus the other guy that thinks that you should use this brand. It's these things, anything to create an argument amongst hunters, people are going to find a way to do that. And I think that also there is something to hunting in like New Mexico and Arizona and that desert country versus hunting like the high timber of Idaho or Montana or Utah or something. And I think that the way that they react to the full moon is going to be a little bit different in those two regional areas. So do I think there's a big difference in elk behavior? No, I really don't. But I do think that there are some behavioral nuances that are going to be specific to the region that they're, the sandstone deserts of the Southwest. I think that they find it more important to get into a shaded bed area in September, where it's 90 degrees at 7 o'clock in the morning versus the high country of North Idaho or even Southern Idaho, where it's rare to even get to 90 degrees in September. So that I think can have an effect, and I think that's where a lot of those opinions come from. But yeah, for me, man, it just doesn't really change anything.
No, I think you're right, and yeah, elk behavior, basically, the biology and characteristics of elk is the same everywhere when it comes to their survival tendencies, their breeding. All of that is still the same. But I agree too that they do modify a little bit depending on the area that they're living in and how their behavior changes based on that area, because they have to regulate a temperature. They can't get overheated. So in those southern desert states like you're talking about, yeah, they're headed to those shading areas quick.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure. And water. Yeah.
Yep. All right. Here's a legit question for you to answer.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So late season, after the bulls have pulled off, we're talking November time frame. I know they're thinking mainly about food, but would a lost calf call work to get them to tell you where they are?
Can I answer that real quick, Michael?
Go for it.
I know nothing about that. I literally know nothing about that. I went out with my bow this last December, and I waited on an elk trail in the deep snow to try to get one, and I got close, but I don't know. I have no idea. I have heard people talk about how They've used a lost calf sound in like November-ish, and it's called in a bull that was kind of being protective or whatever. But for me, I don't have any personal experience, so that's my answer. I have no idea.
And honesty is a great response. I love it. So Chris, typically, late season, that November time frame, you're exactly right. The bulls have kind of pulled off from the herd. They're going back to solitude. Their main focus at that point is putting calories back on that they lost during the rut, recovering from any injuries that they may have, and also just getting that energy level back up, because they expend a ton of energy and lose a ton of weight during the rut. They are so extremely active. So honestly, in November time, they're also going to be isolated away from the herds. The larger herd bulls, the larger bulls are going to be isolated away. Those guys aren't moving very much at all. They are going to go into thick pockets to where they have food, cover, and water all within a very close proximity of each other. And really, honestly, your best bet at that time, you can try the lost calf call. You may get a response. The response that you're going to get is more probably from the herd itself, with the younger bulls that are still hanging out with the cows. But those larger bulls, going to be hard for them to kind of get pipe off and let you know where they're at. You're probably better off gaining elevation and glassing for those kind of guys if you're looking for a big mature bull. And you may have to spend a lot of time behind glass until you find those little pockets that he's living in, and then plan your route to get in and get him.
See, even I'm learning stuff. Yep, perfect.
I actually just read it on a blog the other day, so I was like, great timing.
I dig it, man.
So, okay, so we've got different approaches or different styles when it comes to calling elk. There's the aggressive style. There is the cow-only sound. There also is kind of a mixture of cow and bull sounds to kind of see how that bull's responding. What would you say your style is?
My style is trying to take the temperature of each bull that I hear. I am not that now. I have really good friends, and what they do is they are just running ridges and they're bugling their heads off everywhere they go, and they kill elk every single year. And so that works. I have other friends that never even touch a bugle. They just use a cow call, and they kill elk every year. I don't want to sit here and say that I am so knowledgeable and experienced at calling in elk that I have an answer to that, other than to say, for me, I have found that taking the temperature of each bull that you either know is there or he vocalized to you. So, how I respond to an elk that you hear that, where's my bugle to? You hear that little lazy, you know that sound?
Yep.
That's the one I don't know how to react to. But if I just get a regular little bugle that calls back to me, and he's a couple hundred yards, I'm going to respond to him a lot differently than that sound I just made. And I'm going to respond to an elk that responds to a cow call a lot different. Does that make sense?
Oh,
and that's for me, that's what works, because if you're just out there trying to challenge every bull you hear, you're going to limit yourself. You're going to have to walk a lot further, and you're going to have to work a lot harder to find a bull that wants to commit suicide in front of your bow. And so you just got to be a little bit savvy in how you think through what that bull is saying. And for me, it's super easy in terms of elk and every other animal out there. I've called in a ton of coyotes, and I've heard coyotes respond. And I've, all these different animals that I've hunted while calling. Turkeys is another one. All these animals that when you're communicating with them, if that animal sounds upset, pissed, shy, or what's the word I'm looking for, where they just don't really care either way. They're just letting you know, hey, I'm over here.
Yep.
Right? Indifferent. That's the word I was looking for. you know by the tone. You know by the tone that they use. You could tell what aggression sounds like. You could tell what indifference sounds like. You could tell a fighter from a lover. All those things. It's really not that difficult. So, and again, we talk about this all the time on my. I think you and I have talked about this on my podcast. You get these dudes when you're out in the woods, and you hear them bugle, and they get a response, and they just start ripping off these loud, aggressive bugles, right? Like, who's your daddy? And,
Right.
that is not the appropriate response every time you hear a bull. And so I kind of have three basic reactions to elk. It's and it's all based on what they tell me they want to hear. They either want to hear more cow elk, which I am not super strong with, but I'm getting better. Or they are just kind of indifferent and are willing to talk, but maybe want you to be a little closer. And then you have the one that is telling you, you better stay back, homie, or we're gonna go the rounds.
Yeah.
And those are the three that I know how to work. That moany sound, I was actually gonna call you because I don't know how to react to that one. I can't ever seem to get anything more than just them doing that little woo back at me. You know what I mean? And I think they're laying down when they're doing that.
It is. They're bedded and they're kind of that indifferent, like you talked about. They're like, yeah, and I'm over here.
Is that what it is? It's just kind of indifferent.
It is. It's. He's letting you know where he's at, but he's like, I could care less if you come over here. I could care less if you go away. And it's. He's just kind of nonchalantly just letting you know, I'm here. Now, the thing with that is, though, but that's
what do you do with that, though?
well, and depending on how far away you are, then at that point, that's where you really go into finding his hot button, taking his temperature. So he can go from indifferent like that, and almost on a bull like that, I'm going to move in 100, 125 yards from him. And then I'm going to set up and I'm going to start doing the breeding sequence, which over at Elk Calling Academy, I've got all the videos that teach the breeding sequence that I do. Because the breeding sequence is a depiction of a bull that has a hot cow. Now, the reason it's effective on a bull like that, because he's going from indifferent to all of a sudden there's a hot cow right over there. It's not my cow, but there's a hot cow. It will pique his interest. And even though he may start bugling a little more, you ignore him. You just focus on what you're doing. You focus on your story. You are a bull with a hot cow. You could care less what is going on around you.
Okay.
And you're going to find that his level, especially if he's a little older bull, a good 5x6, 6x6, he's all of a sudden going to be like, how dare you ignore me? I'm sitting here hollering and you're ignoring me. So that's going to take all of a sudden his aggression level and start turning that dial up on him.
Gotcha.
So then he's going to get to a point where all of a sudden he's no longer going to be bedded. He's going to be standing, and you're going to start hearing him raking. He's going to start display bugling because now he's basically telling you, the bull, you better stay away and get out of here. But he's also telling the cow, hey, come over here to me because I'm a dominant bull. But you keep telling your story. You keep going on at it. And all of a sudden, you're going to hear him cork this bugle that is going to knock your hat off. You're going to feel it to the soul, and then all of a sudden, it's on. Now you switch your attention to him, and you start calling him every bad name in the book. And that's just going to set his aggression level over the edge, and then he's going to come in with like a freight train. He's going to come in, eyes bulged, nostrils flared, like, dude, it's on.
Good deal. Good to know, man.
So
that's the one I'm glad you told me because I struggle with that.
Well, and that's not a bull, because the mistake that a lot of people make is they will take that and they will call to that bull.
Yeah, that's what I always do. I always try to, get a little closer, and nothing aggressive.
Right.
But I'll just send out a little bugle to him, and he's not excited, man. He doesn't care.
But he's already indifferent. He's basically bedded down. He could really care less, and so that's where by telling your story and create a, because think about, you go into an area one day and there are just bulls ripping. I mean, there are multiple bulls just screaming, and there's one in the center of all of it. You've basically got a bull with a hot cow, and all the other bulls around understand what's going on because of the sounds that's going on with that bull tending that hot cow. It's just like growing up in grade school. As soon as you hear somebody holler fight, how everybody from the playground just right to that one spot where they hollered fight. That's how this is. These bulls start recognizing the sound. They're like, that's a hot cow. Now all of a sudden they're interested because they'll check, if they have any cows, they'll check their cows real quick. I don't have any. I don't have a hot cow. I don't have to worry about leaving my hot cow because any bull that's in this area is focused on that hot cow over there. And so that's how you can basically create that rut frenzy by telling that story. And that's what's going to get him interested and him all of a sudden elevate a little bit because he wants to come in and breed that cow.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, man.
All right. Andy finally is throwing a serious question out here.
No way.
I know. He even said serious question, exclamation point.
Oh, that's when you know, Michael, that we are, that is a turning point of the night.
It is. The fact that we got Andy to throw out a serious question. What advice would you give a guy who has elk hunted the better part of 30 years and only killed 3 elk? This person spent their childhood watching videos and reading books. So, you want to take this one, or you want?
No, you take this one, man. That's right up your alley.
Yeah. So there's going to be a few questions that I'm going to ask. So, are they hunting in an area that is a low population, a low density of elk, and they just don't have those opportunities? Are they, what approach are they taking? How are they hunting? Have they done the exact same thing for 30 years? Because we're creatures of habit. I talk to a lot of guys that hunt the same place and they're like, man, it's just not like it used to be. My family has hunted there for 3 generations. And, and I'm like, well, are the elk still there? Are you still hunting in that place? And they're just, well, we've always hunted there. The elk numbers aren't there anymore. We don't really see the sign like we used to. So we are creatures of habits. So I would tell that person maybe they need to start looking at new areas. They need to look at the approach that they're taking. They need to take a look at the style and start making adjustments of that. But really, Andy, I would be interested to sit down with that person and really have a conversation about their approach. So,
for sure. Can I add to that, Michael?
Please do.
I had to turn my video off there for a minute because my internet was crapping out again. But anyway, yeah, no, Andy, it's exactly what I was talking about with what happened to me, man. Like I mean, I was taught basically we're hunting for mule deer, except for these animals, they scream at you, and I had this thing where I was super stubborn about, well, I've always done it this way, and I'm always going to go back to this exact spot. And I don't remember who gave me this advice, but somebody gave me this advice a few years back, and it has just really stuck with me. Don't fall in love with an area. Fall in love with finding elk. And that is, man, when I heard that, it was like, bam, that is exactly what my issue has been. I would find these areas where, man, it looks like there should be elk in here. It looks like there have been elk in here sometime in the past 1,100 years. It looks like this is a cool trail for me to be on. It looks really elky, but are there elk in there? No. I just always went back. And you know what? To hell with those kind of areas. Fall in love with finding elk. And that's exactly what I did. I broke my own personal stubbornness and started really branching out and being open to new areas where sometimes you kind of think that it's your gut telling you don't think there's elk in there, but it's not your gut. It's your mind and your stubbornness telling you that you need to go back to the spot you've been hunting for 30 years, right? Where the reality is this spot over here, once you get out of the truck and you start walking into that area, whether it's a drainage or down a ridge or something like that, all of a sudden your gut's going to tell you, okay, you're in the right place. There is sign everywhere. There are trails and there are water holes. There are, all the things that you want to find. There's feed. And all of a sudden it's going to click and that area is going to pan out. And that's what made all the difference for me, was stop living in my own prison. I was like in this hunting prison in my mind. And I branched out and decided that just because this spot has a great trail that looks like there should be elk in there, doesn't mean there's elk in there. And I just moved on, and I don't get attached to spots anymore, like at all. I don't get attached. Yeah, that's my advice with that.
No, that's a great advice, and I agree wholeheartedly. Don't fall in love with a spot, because same thing. I've been into areas that are like, oh my God, this is the most beautiful elk country I've ever seen. There's got to be elk running all over the place, and then you get in there and you can't even find a track. But here's a crazy thing that I kind of want to point out on this, where if you listen to that question, hunted the better part of 30 years and only killed 3 elk. If you remember earlier where I said the average is 1 elk every 5 to 7 years. So let's say if you're 7 years, in a 28-year span, you've only killed 4 elk. That number right there, 3 out of 30, is pretty dang close to what the averages are when it comes to elk hunting.
And honestly, there's a lot of people that would be jealous over 3 elk. That it's not like a terrible thing. It's not a terrible thing.
No, it's not. And you may have other things, factored in there, because, it could be a person that's living in a state that is a draw system, and maybe they've only drawn 3 tags in that 30-year period.
Yeah. I always think of the poor bastards that live back east, and they can only come out like once every 10 years. It's or once every 20 years, or just the expense. And, it's just all how you think about it and how you do the math in your own mind.
I'll tell you what, though, the way the elk populations are going in Kentucky and Pennsylvania and some of those areas, it might not be too long where some of us suckers in the West are heading east.
Yeah, and they're huge elk too, man. Have you seen the pictures of those ones in Tennessee? Like, these things are freaking ginormous.
Well, you think about it.
I'd faint.
Kentucky has mild winters. They really don't have any predators, and because of all the mining, they have all those minerals in the soils.
Oh, that's a good point, man. I didn't even think about that. Same thing in Pennsylvania with all the miners. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's great habitat.
Yeah.
And they're like, every time I see a picture of an elk in like Kentucky or Tennessee or Pennsylvania, you've got these super dark, brown, beautiful antlers, and they're just huge. They're huge animals.
Yeah.
And the antlers are big, they're like 300 plus class kind of elk. Crazy.
Yeah, and I've sat there and said that I'll bet you here within the next 5 to 10 years, the next world record comes from the eastern side of the U.S.
Yeah, I'll bet you're right, man. I wouldn't go against you on that bet.
Yep. So, okay, so you say base camp, which I'm right there with you. I mean, early on in my career, it was backcountry hunting, 7 miles back in, 8 miles back in, and in here probably for the last 10, 15 years or so, it's been base camp. And I agree that having that mobility, being able to go hit multiple trailheads, and I think on public ground, that's key. And I love the fact where you said you have 30 different spots downloaded, because if you get to one spot oh, somebody's there. I'm going to go to another backup plan. Would you say that people sometimes just get focused, or they only spend time on scouting that one area, and then they kind of keyhole their opportunities when
Hmm.
it comes to elk?
Yeah, I absolutely do, man. I see that all the time. And I see, so one of the places I go, and I'm not going to like divulge the area, but one of the areas I spent, I think, 10 days there this last year. And there were these hunters that had camped, and they're there every year. They bring up all these wall tents, and there's like 10 of them. And I don't I don't know, like, I don't think they're bad hunters, and I don't think anything along those lines. So I don't want anybody to take me wrong, but I know exactly where those guys go every day, and it's the same couple of spots, and they go to the same exact drainage and trailhead and mountain every single day, and they're up there the whole time. Like I said, I was there for 10 days, and they were up in the same spots, and out of the 10 guys, there's like 3 different areas that they kind of split up and go to. And they're like keyholed in. I never see elk hanging in their camp. They're keyholed in. They're just not being open to other ideas. They're letting their own stubbornness kill their success. And I see it. It's the same thing every year. They're just always, because they all have in Idaho. Well, you're in Idaho. You can tell the license plate tells you what county they're living in, right?
Right.
And so they're from a unique county that they're the only ones up there from that county. So I know it's the same. It's the same guys every year. The other point I wanted to make to what you just said, Michael, is when somebody is, let's say you make a plan and you want to go to spot A, and you get up super early, you drive to the trailhead, or wherever it's at. I always call it trailheads, but I don't. It's very rare that I'm parked at a trailhead. I usually find the most random spot on the side of the road and just go in. But anyway, you get there and you're excited to go into the spot, but when you get there, you find out there's a truck there. Keep in mind, most hunters are not going to be as outgoing and aggressive as you're going to be. When I say aggressive, I don't mean in terms of your vocalizations or bugles or anything like that. I mean as far as you're willing to go. I mean as steep as you're willing to climb, all those kind of things. Most hunters, and again, I don't mean any negative connotations toward anybody, but they're going to walk a few hundred yards from their truck. They're going to rip off a few super aggressive, Doug Flutie sounding bugles, and they're going to walk back to their truck. Okay? And so if somebody's in your spot, and go try another spot, and then come back in the afternoon, and I'll almost guarantee you that spot's going to be open. Yeah. I can't tell you how many times I have done that, and then I walked into my plan A spot and called in a bull. Yep. And doesn't mean I killed him, but I called him in and had a great elk encounter because they didn't go further than 200 or 300 yards away from the truck, and then they decided they were missing their hot cup of coffee and headed back to the truck.
Yeah, they wanted to go back and watch the TV that they had on the satellite back at camp. So Mr. Mike Burnside is in the house. So welcome, Mike. So yeah, and so I need to clarify something. You'll hear me say trailhead a lot. The thing that you guys need to remember when I say trailhead is it's not a designated trailhead.
Like trailhead, yeah.
Well, it could be like you said. I could be pulling off on a turnout or a wide spot on the road because there's a game trail where they come down and cross the road right there. So it could be a game trail. It could be a hiking trail. It could be a motorcycle trail. It could be a gated road. So when I say trailhead, it's basically that's where I'm going to hit the trail. That's the start of my journey. So
I agree, and I'm the same way. I sometimes pull off where people are stopping and asking if I'm okay and need help changing a tire or something because it's just a random spot.
Yep. No, same thing. And you know what's funny is because it's a lot of times you find those little areas where everybody just zooms right by, and they're driving by your truck chuckling, going, That dude's an idiot. He has no clue.
What's that idiot doing?
Yeah, why is he parking there? And little do they know I'm sitting 250 yards up above the road, working a bull, but we just shut up because we heard their four-wheeler coming or something. So
yeah.
Okay, you're going into a new area. How early do you get boots on the ground? How early do you get in there and scout that new area, or do you scout?
Well, for me, you mean time of year?
Yeah.
Okay. So I am a fairly avid turkey hunter. I'm a bear hunter. I do a little bit of shed hunting. I do a ton of camping. Specific to actual scouting, I don't do a lot for elk. I know where the elk are going to be. And when I say that,
going into a new area.
So a new area is going to be different because that's going to be, where, like for example, I just told you I set that bait barrel right for the bear.
Yep.
I found a new little spot where I want to check out this September. So that's a good point. If I'm going, let's say I draw a tag in Wyoming, I'm going to make a trip in like the end of June or beginning of July. And just get fairly familiar with like the road systems of where I'm going to base camp, and get some ideas of what the terrain looks like in person versus how it looks on Google Earth or something. And that's really going to be about it for me. I know a lot of people they put a lot of emphasis on pre-scouting for September elk. If I was hunting elk with a rifle in November, that's going to change my answer dramatically. If I'm hunting mule deer, that's going to change my answer dramatically. But for September elk, and maybe you've got a contrasting opinion on this, Michael, but I'm not going to spend a ton of time scouting boots on the ground prior to September because I'm going to kind of have that area dialed in between e-scouting and maybe a weekend prior to in like midsummer. Yep. That's my opinion. And again, what's your take on it? Because it's probably different than mine.
No, actually, it's kind of along the same lines. And basically, as soon as the snow is gone, that I can get into an area that I can go tool around on the side by side, or I'm going on a turkey hunt, or I'm going on a bear hunt. If I'm out in the woods in the spring, I'm scouting. I'm always constantly looking and keeping an eye out for old rubs, for wallows, all of these. It doesn't matter if I'm up camping during the summer and kind of like last weekend when we were going for, the side-by-side ride. We were going over to look at country, but I'm constantly taking a look and scouting, going, man, there's a bench right up there, and man, that's northeastern facing timber. And then I'm going to pull up on X and go, do we have water there? Do we have a creek there? What's the access right? Is there a bunch of roads? And so even when I'm out in the springtime bear hunting or turkey hunting or even during the summer camping, I'm always scouting. I'm always keeping an eye out for elk sign, for rut sign. So now
I'll give some of you. Go ahead. Sorry, I cut you off there.
I was just going to say, and it could be that when planning a camping trip, I may pull up on X and go, you know what? I've kind of e-scouted this area. Let's go camping up here. Even though I have a good area, I'm always constantly wanting to explore new areas because it goes back to what you were talking about with that group that they keyhole themselves because, and I'll bet you part of it, the reason they hunt there is because they know it. They're afraid to go learn a new area.
Look, it goes back to that age-old saying that nobody improves when you're in your comfort zone, and that's you have to get out of that comfort zone and find new spots. And you nailed it, Michael, with the camping. Does it ever blow your mind when you think that you know your unit that you've hunted a long time? You think you know it so well, right? You know every little nook and cranny and all this stuff, and then all of a sudden, boom, you find this big, huge basin you've never been in before. And it's like, how have I missed this over the last 10 years or whatever, you know? Does that happen to you?
Oh, absolutely. And in fact,
Yeah.
Michael Bozarth just kind of made a comment on that where he says, I like to scout even familiar areas to check out what this year's conditions are. Are the elk favoring a different area and checking out areas nearby that I might have overlooked? So,
Yeah.
so yeah,
Look,
you find little nooks and crannies, and that's why I'll tell a lot of people that when you're out there camping, if you just want to go for a walk with a family, go find a game trail. Follow that game trail. See where
mm-hmm.
it takes you. That's how I have found some of my best little hidden pockets. It's because I just jumped on a game trail one summer and just started walking down it, and all of a sudden ended up in this place. In fact, we have one place that we call Shangri-La, and that's how this place was found.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it, man. One of the things that, and I'll give somebody a little bit of advice if like you're worried about upping your hunting time, meaning you're using scouting time in April or May or June or whatever, and maybe your significant other is giving you a hard time about spending so much time focused on hunting or whatever, but you make it a family affair.
Mm-hmm.
Like, take the kids out, and during that springtime. You would be blown away by, and you could do this real sneaky too if you want to be real creative, like I had to be. Let's go morel mushroom hunting. Let's take the kids out. But I take them to areas, and they're just having a ball, and they're finding mushrooms. But I'm looking for rubs. I'm looking for sign. I'm looking for where the trails are leading to, feeding areas, bedding areas. I'm looking for all that kind of stuff. And you know what? We're getting a bunch of morel mushrooms out of the deal.
And here's a better one. End of July. Hey, let's go pick huckleberries.
Oh yeah. And that's a great one, Michael. And it works out twofold for me because I love huckleberries.
Same.
And so we'll go pick huckleberries, and we'll camp up where we know the huckleberries are at, and we'll go spend the day picking. And then next morning, I'll make these huge huckleberry pancakes. Yep. While also marking all these spots on my either base map or Onyx or whatever, where I know I saw a bunch of elk sign.
Exactly.
And
family thinks you're out having a great family thinks you're out having a great bonding time picking huckleberries, and you're making fresh huckleberry pancakes. But you're exactly.
They don't need to know your scout.
Nope. You're paying attention to the rubs. You're paying attention to the trails. You're paying attention to all of that stuff. And see, Mike Burnside just said my trout fishing trips in late July or August for areas I'm going to hunt that fall make for great boots on the ground for those hunts. Gives me insight into what e-scouting has found. Same thing.
He's no rookie. He's no rookie.
Well, and I think the same thing that kind of touches on this that people may be missing out on, you're also spending quality time with your family in the outdoors. They don't need to know you're scouting. They don't need to know you're paying attention to these things on this fishing trip. You're fishing up and down this creek bank, and man, you're paying attention to the trails that are coming into water, and man, look at those tracks on that trail. You pull out your phone real quick, you drop a pin.
Yeah, exactly. It's such a great point. And Mike makes a great point. So does Michael Bozarth. What's with all the mics tonight? But hey, if Bozarth says it, man, I listen. If Bozarth says it, I listen, because that dude, he is a straight up elk killer. And the thing that what you just talked about with, you actually are legitimately getting some good quality family time there. And I think that is something that gets missed a lot when we get a little bit obsessed, because you and I think, are the same we're cut from the same cloth. We think about this stuff year round. You know what I'm thinking about on Christmas morning? I'm not thinking about Santa Claus. I'm thinking about elk hunting. Yeah. And so that is a great point. Everybody puts on their resume when they're sending out and they need a new job that how they're really good at multitasking. You know what? Prove it. Go take your family out and pick some huckleberries and find some new elk hunting spots, because that's how it happens. That's how it happens.
So Michael Myers just raised his hand and said, "Hey, here's another mic." So, Andy, how long after a burn will the elk come back?
So I don't know, like, if there's a scientific answer to that, Michael. But for me, I have found both elk and mule deer and whitetail hanging out in burns like 20 years later, and I'm not even exaggerating. And I don't know if that's just circumstantial that they're, I don't think that that's because of the effect of the burn that far along, but it helps visually because all the undergrowth is still not quite so thick you can't see. But I mean, I am of the opinion that if there's a burn and it happened the year before or even 2 months before and it's still smoldering, you need to be in it.
Yeah. No, and I think that's what he's asking, how soon after the burn the elk will come back in. And
soon.
Yeah.
Sorry, but again, hamster doesn't spin my wheel very fast, brother. Sorry about that.
He kind of worded the question, a little. I mean, it's Andy, so
Yeah.
So
Andy.
you touched on the length. You're exactly right. They can keep hitting that area for years and years until the new timber really starts growing and then chokes out that vegetation. But as far as how soon, as soon as that ash is cooled, they're right back in there. Especially as soon as if you get a fire that's done, it's put out, and then you get a rain, and all of a sudden those little plush shoots start growing. Oh,
yeah, and they're like a real bright, brilliant green, right?
Yep.
And they start popping. The elk freaking love them. So do deer.
Oh yeah.
Deer love them.
Well, because those things are chock full of so much nutrients. So
yeah.
I mean, I took a bull 7 years ago. Within 2 weeks of the fire getting put out. So the fire got put out, and then about 10 days after that, 3 days straight, it was just rain and snow and hammering. And in a couple of days after that, sun came out, warmed up, and I just went back in there just to see if anything was in there, and there was elk all over the place. I ended up killing a bull in there, and his mouth was completely black because he had been in there.
Oh wow!
Because he had been there picking those shoots.
Awesome.
So
yeah. No, I was hunting. This is down in. No, it was Utah. I was in Utah, and there was a big fire that come through in the summer, and come September. So in Utah they have this. Your rifle season actually opened back. I don't know if it's still like this, but it opened in September. And like mid-September, it was like rifle season for elk, and anyway, there was still like those big deadfall logs that were smoking, and it created like this foggy, misty kind of feel. Okay. And I remember I'm sitting on this ridge, and elk are kind of working down into it, and they were feeding, and they were there for hours, and there were no bulls. This was a spike only unit, and so there was everything but a spike, of course, in this group. Right. But anyway, point being is like literally we had smoking ash and like this mist created from it, and they were in there feeding, and they were in there for several hours.
Oh yeah. Burns are one of the things that I absolutely love to focus on. Same thing with logged areas.
Oh yeah.
I'll tell you what, I mean, logging operation, I swear sometimes the sound of that chainsaw is just a dinner bell to deer and elk. Because as soon as the operation shuts down at the end of the day and that last rig pulls out, those elk and deer are flooding in there to eat off those slash piles.
Oh, for sure. It's just presenting all this nourishment right there at head level that was previously not reachable for them. And so, yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. Okay, so again, here's some other approaches where you can either start low elevation and work up in the morning, so basically hunt up, pack down, or you could start at higher elevation where you can listen better, but you may have to drop down. What's your preference? Are you a hunt up, pack down, or start up top where you can hear everything?
Well, so I'm a thermal hunter. I am. It's all about the thermal. So if it's first thing in the morning, I'm hunting from low to high. If I'm, let's say I go into an area and within a few hours I determine there's no elk and there hasn't been since the Ice Age in that area, I'm pulling out of there and I'm going to a different spot. Well, by now it's noon, thermals are coming up, so I'm going to start high and go down, or just stay on like a ridge where I can kind of call into two different areas. Because I like the opportunity of calling into two different drainages if possible. It's not always possible, but sometimes it is. And so again, that's just always, I think that if a hunter is out there looking, and maybe this is your first year or something along those lines, and you're not familiar with mountain thermals and you don't know what those things do, you don't even go hunting until you understand those. And you can learn about them in 10 minutes. It's not complicated, but yeah, thermals that's how I hunt. There's no exception to that rule.
No, and great approach. I agree with you 100% because again, it goes back to the knowledge. If you ever really sit there and watch how elk always move with the wind in their nose. Always. And the reason for that is they can always smell what's in front of them. And here's a prime example. So elk will feed down lower and then they'll start working up the mountain to their bedding area. As they're working up, they have that thermal blowing right in their nose. And so what Jim's talking about is the mountain thermals. They're a diurnal, which means they go two directions. So either down the hill or up the hill. So if you think about hot air, cold air is heavier and it falls. So in your morning and evening time, your thermals are coming down. During the heat of the day, they're going up. So these elk, what they do is they move up the mountain with the thermal in their nose, but they time it so they reach their bedding area about the time that thermals change. And so what they're doing is the whole way up, they're smelling what's in front of them. Then when they start getting to their bedding area, those thermals are changed and they're able to smell their back trail. And so this is a mistake that a lot of new hunters make is they will follow the elk up on the same trail. And then when those thermals start changing, guess what? That bull's going to get a nose full of you, and we don't smell very good to them. And so instead of settling down and bedding down, they're just going to roll up over the top and they're going to go to their next alternate bedding area. So one thing to keep in mind, if you know a travel corridor of elk, don't follow the elk up off the mountain. Get off to the side and mirror them going up.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And guys, if you're listening to this and you don't know anything about thermals, I'm not trying to self-promote here, Michael, but I do have an article on my website that is like a thermals 101 that walks you through the whole day of how thermals work on a mountain. And it's just at the westernhuntsman.com. Just click on the articles tab, scroll down, and you'll find the thermals article. And it is super, super thorough in terms of how mountain thermals work, and without being like, some boring ass read.
Wow. I can't believe you came on here and did a self-promotion of your own site.
I did.
Yeah.
I did, but I'm wearing Elk Calling Academy hat.
Well, it's okay, because I was going to make sure you actually covered all your podcast and your website here once we wrap things up. So you're absolutely good. So not a shameless plug. So Daryl Hansen, this is a question for both of you. What is your favorite week in September to start calling in bulls most productive?
We should ask Daryl that, because that's funny. He's asking. Daryl, he's like trying to sneak in on us and ask us this question. He knows dang well, I think. He's a great elk hunter and a good buddy of mine. So I don't even remember what his question was. What was the question again?
What is your favorite week in September to start calling in bulls most productive?
Yeah, September 1 to September 31 or 30th. That's my favorite. Do you have a take on that, Michael? I mean, obviously early September, that first week, it could be pretty quiet. I mean, it could be crickets, but it could also be pretty dang active.
It can.
And so I don't know that I have a favorite week. I mean, the 10th through the 20th seems to be a peak time, but I've had some really good action before and after then. How about you?
No, absolutely. I mean, I've killed elk all throughout the year, and you're exactly right. Some years it's early because they're still in the cow gathering and competing mode. Other times it's, middle of the month, and sometimes it's the end of the month. So my favorite week in September is the week that those bulls are really responsive.
I love that answer. I'm going to start using that from now on. I'm going to plagiarize you. That was a great
Perfect.
answer.
Well, because if you think about it, I mean, the way the way the rut cycle goes. So we all know that the autumn equinox, which is either September 21st or September 22nd, that is what triggers the rut. That is what keys the rut. And you have about a plus or minus 7 to 10 day window of that. So let's just say the autumn equinox is the 21st, and you go 10 days each way. That's the 11th to what, October 1st, 2nd, 3rd, somewhere in there. So that means
Mm-hmm.
within that window, you could have the peak rut anywhere within that window. So now from the 11th to middle of August, late August, you're kind of in that pre-rut. You're kind of in that time where bulls are establishing their pecking order, they're gathering their cows. And this is why you can have that variation, because some years they're still gathering cows during that first part of September. Here's a hint. If bulls are still gathering cows at the first part of September, it's going to be a later rut. If the bulls are completed gathering their cows by the end of August, it's going to be a normal rut, maybe a little bit early. So that first weekend that you go out, you can kind of get a good gauge of how that rut is going to hit this year and where it's going to fall within that window around the autumn equinox.
Yeah. This goes back, Michael, to what we were talking about earlier, and just understanding like the basic concepts and behavioral knowledge of elk. Because you nailed it there with, um, if you don't know anything about elk, you got to understand these bulls are bachelored up all year long, right? Except for coming into about mid-August, they start breaking apart and they start going to these areas where they're wanting to be alone. They're starting to look for cows, right? And then you get into September, and the rut is where you said around that September 20th, 22nd is that fall equinox. That does not, in my opinion, mean that is peak rut.
Nope.
In my opinion, peak rut is going to be just prior to that. And that's where these bulls are figuring out their pecking order. They're figuring out who's the herd bull. They're figuring out what these satellite bulls, these smaller bulls, they start getting really excitable, and they start trying to figure out an advantage they can gain on the herd bull. But they don't really know what they're doing, right? And so they just make all sorts of crazy mistakes. And then that starts all calming down. And again, I'm just kind of summarizing that in a real vague, super elementary breakdown. But the point being is by understanding the elk and how they behave and how they go into a breeding cycle, and the reason behind it, and how it's, in my opinion, it's like God's design. So those calves they land at the exact time in the spring, so that they make it into the next winter just fine, and just it's super interesting stuff. It's super interesting stuff. I'm trying to remember, Michael, who I was going to reference. I want to say it was Chris Rowe, but somebody has a really good podcast episode that is driven by science on the actual natural or biological cycle of an elk's life throughout a year. And I can't remember. I don't know where that resource is. I keep wanting to say Chris Rowe.
I think it is Chris. Yeah, I remember hearing it too. But yeah, to kind of touch on what you were saying there, it's understanding how the bull's mindset changes, because what he's focusing on and the mindset changes throughout each time of the year. And if you understand that and recognize that, that's just going to help you be more successful out in the year. And also too, if you understand, that pre-rut, peak rut, post-rut, secondary rut, and how those all fall into the calendar, you're going to understand how that bull's mindset is going to change. And that's going to help with your calling approach too, because you're going to know if he's in an aggressive state, if he's in a gathering state, if he's in a defending state, or if he's on that full on, I've lost my mind, I'm breeding.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So, Andy, you're safe. So, yeah, so basically Andy asked, question my wife asked me that I have no answer for, but definitely worries her. While hunting in Ant Flow, the menstrual cycle decides to show up. Do you go from hunter to hunted, or are you safe? There are,
Like being hunted by the elk?
well, no, not being hunted by elk, but being hunted by predators. So
Oh, gotcha.
there are studies or suggestions that yes, you can get a heightened sense during that time frame from predators, but honestly, the chances of that happening are so slim. But you're safe. So.
Yeah, and that's going to be super dependent to, somebody that asked a question on here earlier. I don't know if he wants me to say his name or not, but he just had like 3 grizzlies show up on his bait barrel in an area where I hunt quite a bit and never really think about grizzlies. Oh. And so I'm like, oh man, I should probably upgrade my handgun, man. So anyway, it's just always be kind of cognizant of the grizzlies are the only, that's just something that, I don't know. I got a thing for grizzlies. I'm like worried a grizzly's going to take me out someday, man. So I'm always thinking about it.
Yeah, if you're constantly aware of your surroundings and of course, hygiene and all that kind of stuff, all come into play, you'll be all right. So, yeah. All right, brother, we are 1 hour and 47 minutes in. Let's start wrapping it up. So, yeah. Tell everybody about the Western Huntsman, what you do with it, website, podcast, how can they find you, what you do, and all that good stuff.
Good deal. Well, it's like you said, everything for my platform could be found at the Western Huntsman. TheWesternHuntsman.com, at The Western Huntsman on Instagram, The Western Huntsman on Facebook, all that kind of stuff. So our podcast is, my podcast it's a very simple mission. My mission is to get guys like Michael on and everybody else that we get on the show and talk about the things that make us better hunters, to create a deeper passion for hunting and outdoors so that we can always be there as a coalition to fight against the people that don't want us to continue on this hunting heritage and this lifestyle that we all enjoy. And it's really the sole purpose. I want people fired up about hunting. And that is, I think, the best way to create a willing coalition of people that are ready to fight against the anti-hunting movement. So that's kind of the basis of it. But yeah, the podcast, we're a weekly show. We do a lot of bonus episodes. Michael's been on quite a few of them. One of our bonus series is called The School of September. And that's just all about archery elk hunting in September from guys like Michael that actually know what they're doing, not like me. So you're not listening to me. I get real experts on. And so,
and you've got the School of September going on right now.
I do, yeah. We've got School of September. We've had 2 episodes so far for this year, and my general idea with School of September is to release 1 a month until September, and that's kind of on top of my weekly episodes. Sometimes we do more. Like last year, we did more. I'm thinking I'm probably going to have to get you back on for this year, and if you've got some more information that you didn't share last year, because we went super long last year, and that was awesome.
And we kind of went on some advanced stuff, which was kind of fun. I would love to come. Oh, look at that, Mr. Guy Western Contours himself, hugs and kisses.
Oh, I'm surprised he was even able to get out of his chair. I'm surprised Guy was even able to grace us with his presence with all those white claws that he's been, you know how he is.
Oh, Guy, Jim, you're a stud, brother. So that actually popped in before you started bagging on him about the white claws.
Okay, I take it back. Guy.
All right, so you've already done a couple of episodes because last year during the School of September, there was myself, Paul Medell, Jason Phelps, Chris Rowe,
Dirk Durham, Julia from Elk Bros.
Oh yeah.
Gosh, I think that's it. And then this year we've had Dan Staten with Elk Shape.
Yep.
And then we've had the Hunt _ DIY guy on.
Okay.
For some reason, he's going to kill me. Why am I drawing a blank on his name? I talk to him all the dang time, and now I'm just like drawing. I always look at him because he's on Instagram. Hunt DIY.
Are you talking about
anyway?
Zach Bohey?
Yeah, Zach Bohey. Gosh, Zach, I'm going to send you a T-shirt for getting your name, dude. That's ridiculous.
Oh, so if you guys have not been over to the Western Huntsman, if you haven't listened to any of Jim's podcast, he does a great job. The School of September is a really great resource for you guys to tap into. It kind of follows along with what we talked about earlier, to where on that podcast with the School of September, you can get different perspectives from different people in one location there, and you can grab tidbits from each one. So Guy said you forgot Zach's name because you've had too many White Claws. So all right.
Oh, Guy.
Okay, so for those of you guys that have tuned in that you may not know who I am, as mentioned in the opener, I'm Michael Batiste. I'm the founder of Elk Calling Academy. And Elk Calling Academy is basically where I take my 30 plus years of elk hunting and just lay it out there. And I do have instructional tutorials. Every 2 weeks we do a mastermind group live Q&A that is only for herd members. It is a private Q&A group. You can find that at elkcallingacademy.com. We also have a lot of articles in there. And this is kind of a new twist with Wapiti Live Q&A right here, with bringing on, Jim or Guy, and we actually do have some other guests we're getting lined up. That this is going to kind of be a new norm as well too. So for all of you that used to always tune into the Wapiti Live Q&A, yeah, I'm kind of back a little bit. It's not going to be in the same capacity it was before, but I kind of have fun sitting down with somebody else, because now I can ask you a question and let them talk.
Yeah, and Michael, you do a really good job with these. I mean, this is like super informative information. I love this kind of platform. Other than, I will tell you, I'm like I'm finding myself to be a little camera shy. I'm not used to having a camera on me while I'm recording with the microphone, and it's like kind of giving me this little complex. I've got this like curly hair coming up, and I'm like, man, what is that hair doing? It's a new thing for me, man.
Well, I like I said, you should have thrown on the blonde wig, and you would have been good to go. Maybe I can send you one of those hearing enhancer 2000s that I had on during the behind the string round table.
Yes, yes, I need one, buddy.
So, all right. I don't see any other questions coming in, so we're going to wrap this up for tonight. Thank you to all of you that tuned in. I know it was, almost 2 hours long. Thank you for all of you that participated, made comments, asked questions, roasted Jim a little bit. It's been absolute blast, Jim. I appreciate it, brother.
Michael, it's always a good time with you, my friend. I appreciate it, and can't wait to do it again.
Absolutely, we will have to do it again. And yeah, let's talk more about the ECA class up in northern Idaho this summer. See what we can put together for later summer. But yeah, we'll talk about that. So, all right, guys, as always, keep calling, keep practicing. Most importantly, though, have fun. And we will see you guys on the next Wapiti Live Q&A. And who knows who the next guest is going to be. Have a great night.